The other 99%. You Can Dare to Lead by Debashis Chatterjee. Chapter 1. Practice. Have an appointment with yourself. Principle. Leaders see their world within themselves. Date yourself. This is not the age of information. This is the age of attention deficiency. We all have our unique place in the world. In order to find our own space, we have to learn to stay centered. I remember a few lines written by a Latin American poet. They read, "Still, still, the forest knows where you are. You must let it find you." The ancient sagas of India did exactly that. They did not run around the world in search of truth. They looked for it in the stillness of their own beings. In the 21st century, very few of us live in forests. However, we have to deal with our jungle of information. If we have lost ourselves in the wilderness of information, the only way out is to find our center in the calm depths of a reflective mind. It is like searching for a misplaced object by curtaining our mind rather than running around the room. We must make peace with the forest to find ourselves in it. The fragmented world of information is held together in the wholeness of our attention. This attention knows the relevance of information. This attention puts information in its proper context and perspective. This attention brings us home to ourselves. Information absorbs our attention. An excess of information therefore results in loss of attention. Unless, of course, we take care to create greater capacity for attention within us. Let me tell you a real story of acute attention disorder. I am at Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I find myself within a small group of people who are waiting for a bus. Standing next to me is a mid-career student of Harvard University. He has a schedule in his hand that tells him that there would be a bus arriving within a few minutes. Yet, this man glances feverishly at his watch 15 to 20 times in the next few seconds. Sure enough, the bus arrives on time. Later on, I reconnected with the same gentleman at the Harvard Business School. I asked him, "Why were you so restless?" He said, "I can't help it. I was uncomfortable just standing there." Then I asked him, "If it is so difficult for you to have a date with yourself for just a minute, you might as well think of what kind of a person you have become." This sets him thinking. Many young people today are likely to see themselves living this story. With the rush of information spreading like infection, we are beginning to experience greater demands on our attention. We cannot cope with this information overload anymore. We see ourselves as victims of the law of diminishing attention. The troubled housewife is channel surfing for hours on her living room television. Her eyes have a vacant look about them, as she is watching nothing in particular. She is like our watch watcher at Harvard Square. She is attention deficient. By channel surfing, she is merely outsourcing her anxiety. The dot of attention is everywhere, from the living room to the marketplace. The world of commerce, brands germinates and terminate in a short span of attention. In the consumer electronics market in Tokyo, a new digital device can hold a buyer's attention for no more than 3 months. The Disney Corporation in California introduces a product every 5 minutes. The lifespan of a CEO has been less than half in major corporations. The script is the same whether it is boardroom or the bedroom. 1 out of every 2 marriages in the Western world fails for lack of attention on the part of the spouses. But the most disturbing of all these attention lapses is that we cannot have an appointment with ourselves even for a few brief seconds. Imagine that our body and soul live like two decent neighbors in adjacent flats in a high-rise building. They are located so near to each other, but they never get to meet. We cannot connect with ourselves. We take time to repair our car, yet there is no time to renew our relationship to ourselves. This is nothing less than suicide. We have quietly surrendered the vitality of our lives to drab economic equations. While making a living, we have forgotten to make a life. What prevents us from relating to the deeper and greater capacities within ourselves? My response is it is your ego. This ego, which forever wants to absorb our attention, we want a bigger car, not to accommodate our body, but to massage our ego. Here is a story that will reveal the hollowness of our ego driven personality. A mosquito saw an elephant crossing a bridge and asked for a ride. The mosquito said, "Hello, mate. If I sat on your back and give you some company as you cross the bridge." The elephant said nothing. The mosquito sat on the elephant's back. He felt very proud that he could persuade the elephant to be a co rider. As they were crossing the bridge, the mosquito cried out, "Watch out, brother! Two of us are very heavy. Make sure the bridge doesn't collapse." The elephant said nothing. As they crossed over through the bridge, the mosquito said, "See how I guided you safely through?" The elephant said nothing. Finally, the mosquito got off the elephant's back and buzzed. "Here is my business card. If you need any help in the future, just call me on my cell phone." The elephant thought that he heard some whispers somewhere, but he dismissed this as a daydream and marched on. The elephant is the enormous flow of our life. The mosquito is our restless ego that thrives by sucking life's attention. The more the elephants ignore the mosquito, the more the ego vanishes. Stand still. On my first visit to America as a student, I learned a new expression from the university campus. Life sucks. I never recognized earlier that mere living would be such an oppressive burden. This is a telling comment on the way we choose to live our lives. In the business of getting about our business, we live merely on the surface of our lives. We inhabit a world of sensations. There used to be a fast food store in our neighborhood that advertised the eating experience as a love at first bite. This ran counter to whatever I had known about love. I was delusioned to learn that the profound mystery of love could be sorted out at the tip of the tongue. The world of sensations may be shallow, but it is seductive. All our senses take us to the world outside. The eyes open, the ears are perked up, the tongue sticks out, the hands reach out to touch. Through our senses, we are constantly channel surfing this world. Day and night, every bit of our attention is parceled out through our multi-sensory channels. They ensure that our lives are fully outbound. In the absence of corresponding inbound attention, we are fully depleted. Reflect. In a world of sensations, the mind is enormously speeded up. A hurried mind is also a worried mind. A mind that is always rushed cannot live without worries. A hurried mind is a stick mind. It is a mind that barks like a stray dog and chases everything in its surrounding without any discrimination. A hurried mind is also forgotten to reflect. This mind can only react to sensations and bark. It cannot think deep. Just as a rested body feels fresh, a relaxed mind becomes capable of deep reflection. A quiet, reflective mind is a wholesome mind. It is an inbound mind. This kind of mind is not only capable of deep contemplation, it is also capable of intense action. The center of cyclone is very quiet. It is from this center the cyclone attains power. A revolving fan is still at the tip. It is here that motion is intensified to the point of stillness. A mind that has learned to slow itself down is indeed a capable mind. For this, our minds need to periodically withdraw from the words of sensation, like a tortoise withdraws its limb to its shell. A sane mind goes inward in search of its quiet center. Your world is in yourself. I used to think what we call ourselves is a small, insignificant part of our world. I was wrong. My wandering mind and my wandering body that travels with me around the world has learned another lesson. The lesson is that the capability of our self is so big that it can contain the whole world and still have some space left in it. I made an interesting discovery in Durban, South Africa, where I had gone to speak on leadership. There, a man who runs an advertising agency told me something fascinating. He related that after an elaborate nationwide survey, the agency found out that their most powerful brands in Africa were Nike, Nelson Mandela, and Coca Cola. I wondered what Nelson Mandela was doing in that premier market space between two giant multinationals. Obviously, Mandela manufactured nothing. He did not produce anything except general goodwill. Yet the market thought that he was precious. Mandela is recognized worldwide for the sake of his own self. His self stands for a cause freedom. Mandela is the name of a liberated self that is so vast that it can contain the aspirations of the whole world looking for freedom. Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison, is now a symbol of freedom. But then, ironically, even freedom is not free. The market puts a price tag on it. So, I came to the conclusion that the world we see out there is a projection of that which we value inside ourselves. In here, Nelson Mandela is valuable because we project him as an embodiment of our own aspiration, our wish to be free. Nike or Coke is valuable because they embody our aspirations for a comfortable, cozy, and dynamic life. Charlie Chaplin is valuable because he represents our acute capacity to be a laughing animal. Chaplin makes us cherish our utterly human capacity to laugh. So you see that we are uniquely gifted in the way we see and relate our world. The Upanishads, the most ancient sacred literature of India, describes the relationship between ourself and our world in simple language. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the atom, so is the universe. Just think about it. Everything in our world is self created. The world is bright because the retina of our eyes reflect light. The world feels warm or cold because our skin senses it as such. We recognize gravity because we can feel our weight. If we touch a piece of sandpaper with our hand, we exclaim, "This sandpaper is rough." This is just half the truth. What we experience is not just the sandpaper, but the resistance of our skin as it rubs against the surface of the paper. What is true of our physical universe is also true of our psychological universe. Our psychological universe is a photocopy on our mind is the original document. When we describe someone as jealous or generous, we actually experience the state of jealousy or generosity within ourselves. The structure of the mind that recognizes jealousy or generosity cannot be any different from the experience of our emotions. Our world is only a part of us and not apart from us. Leaders live in a self referral world. Remember the well known words of Mahatma Gandhi, and I quote, "I must first be the change that I wish to see in my world." Leaders are autonomous beings. They like to assume responsibility for their own lives. On my recent trip to South Africa, I learned something very interesting about Gandhi's development as a leader. I learned that young Gandhi served as a midwife for delivering his third child with his own hands. Remember that Gandhi was a lawyer by profession. Imagine how many of us would be able to learn to do something that was so different from what we are trained to do. How many of us really would have the courage to be responsible for life that is greater than our personal life? Estelle Meires, who lives in Australia, told me about a working woman in New Zealand who decided to be responsible for her own life. Several years ago, this woman went to an office which had many smokers. Her own office space would be filled with smoke that made life unhealthy for her. This woman decided to take a stand to have smoking banned in their own space. Her mostly male colleagues met her campaign for a smoke free office with ridicule, laughter, and sarcasm. Yet she persisted in assuming responsibility for her own life. Eventually, she succeeded in banning smoke from her office. The reality of tobacco free offices all over the world today is a result of many such autonomous decisions by several people like the New Zealander. They provided the critical connections necessary for a critical mass of people who now see smoking in public places as a nuisance rather than entertainment. We always thought that change happens in society when a critical mass of people decide to change. I do not think critical mass is the primary cause of the change. The, red, the real seed of change is the critical connection that people make within their own selves. The world can be altered by just a handful of people who have connected with their own capacity for greatness. The world indeed makes way for those who believe in themselves. The critical connection I am talking about is the combination of our natural talents with our willpower. Our natural talents constitute the blueprint for our journey through the world. Our will provides the energy to undertake this journey. The Upanishads of ancient India calls this combination Swadharma, the law of the self, says the Upanishad. You are what your deepest nature is. As your nature, so is your will. As your will, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny. Quote by Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. A fertile seed is a good example for the law of the self. A single seed has a blueprint of a whole forest inside it. However, the seed needs to mobilize its internal resources by making the critical connection with its inborn intelligence. Then the seed connects with the energizing power of the soil, sunlight, and water. Once this connection is made, one's solitary acorn can create the destiny of a whole oak forest. Anita Roddick, the founder of global cosmetic company The Body Shop International, says, I did not create the company just to invest in, but the one I believed in. While she was the chief executive of the Body Shop, Roddick had a board above her office door that read, Department of the Future. She is visualized a future where she and her employees would volunteer to grow by serving their community. All the staff at the Body Shop were allowed to pay time off, half a day per month, to take part in a community project of their choice. Roddick said that this enabled her staff to raise their sense of self, and that Roddick believed was nothing but an entrepreneurial seed that gave birth to a giant organization with branches around the world. Leaders lead people to themselves. Lee Kuan Yew, the former Prime Minister and the architect of modern Singapore, said in a launch interview with some of us at Harvard University, and I quote, You can train a leader provided he is born as one. He was responding to the question whether a leader is born or made. Is leadership a quality that can be thrust on a person from the outside, or is it something that grows within? I am willing to believe that leadership is not an object or a personality that one acquires. Leadership is a set of subjective principles like courage, dynamism, and creativity that flow from within the self. Leaders are born with people see these subjective resources within themselves as greater than their circumstances. By this definition, leadership is accessible to everyone as everyone has a self, which is the source of all leadership qualities. Imagine that several people are engaged in search for water in a dry land. There is no water on the surface, and the land has had very little rain in the last few years. But there is water underground. This subsoil water has to be accessed by digging wells that are deep enough to reach the source of water. Naturally, it follows that the one who digs deep enough access the water. The leadership is the process of digging. The underground water is a reservoir of resources that lie within the self. These resources, such as courage, creativity, or optimism, make us triumph over unfavorable circumstances such as lack of water in a dry land. Leadership is deeper than just having a certain kind of personality. Personality is merely a persona or a mask. Personality hides the deeper aspect of ourself. The search for the leadership process is personality or style is likely to mislead us. For a long time, the Hollywood sponsored model of leadership has created for us the glamorous image of a leader as a hero on a horseback. We have confused leadership qualities with height, weight, chest size, and cover body appearances. So, what happens when we search for leadership behind the mask of personality? Our search leads us to a set of principles that constitutes our real self. What are the enduring principles that constitute the law of ourself? The universal principle of ourself is that we all seek freedom. Our sense of freedom comes not just through feeling physically free. We seek freedom of the mind and will as well. We want to know what is unknown and conquer the unconquered. Edmund Hillary, first man to have climbed Mount Everest, was once asked, "What made you go all the way up there?" Hillary's response was, "I climbed the Everest just because it was there unconquered." Later on said something more significant. He said, "It is not the mountains we conquer, but ourselves." Leadership is the liberation of the potential that lies within ourselves. Leaders discover that the end of their heroic journeys that their ultimate destination is their self. Quite naturally, leaders lead people to themselves. Where else can leaders lead people to? I would like to conclude this chapter with an interesting incident from Gautam Buddha's life. Buddha was on his deathbed, breathing his last few breaths. His favorite disciple, Ananda, was sitting beside him with tears in his eyes. Before he passed away, these were the words that Buddha spoke to Ananda. He said, "Ananda, do not depend on any external means. Work out your salvation with diligence. Be a light unto yourself." Chapter 1 Practice Points. Number 1. One way to have an appointment with yourself is to set aside a few minutes or space in your daily diary where you write nothing to do. I do not offer this as an option to be lazy. Use these moments for active and productive reflection. In your mind, go through the course of how you spent the whole day. Explore the what mistakes you made or what you could have done or said better. Number 2. Another way to contact yourself is to witness some of the actions that you do mechanically in the course of your day. For instance, most of us brush our teeth, hold the telephone, or even have a cup of tea in a manner we are conditioned ourselves in. We hardly notice how we perform these daily chores. To be watchful of some of these routine activities is a secret of unleashing the power of yourself as the observer. The result of this exercise can be very powerful in unlocking a quiet center in yourself. Very often, we begin to describe our point of view to someone else, starting the sentence with, I think. Frequently, we identify ourselves with our thoughts alone. We can begin to expand our identification with our emotional self by replacing some of the I think expressions with I feel expressions. This will enable us to stay in touch with what we are feeling from moment to moment. We become emotionally more literate as a result of this. Number four, this may sound strange, but the only way to truly relate to oneself is to be detached from one's physical and empirical self. To give you a simple example, you can carefully learn about a chair you are sitting on by getting out of your chair. By detaching yourself from the chair, you are able to examine the chair from all directions, which you couldn't do if you were sitting on it. The great master J. Krishnamurti, while delivering lectures, would often refer to him as the speaker. He would say, for instance, the speaker feels this or that. This enabled Krishnamurti to observe his own feelings with great clarity. Number five, one of the ways to gain true knowledge of the self is to detach and disidentify with those labels that we identify wrongly with ourselves. We can repeat this assertion several times in the course of the day. For instance, we can say to ourselves, I have some qualifications, but I am not my qualifications. I have a job, but I am not my job. I have a body, but I am not my body. I am pure awareness that tells me I have all of these, but they are not what I am.